If you're an agency owner, you might be leaving money on the table. This is why I created the 30-30 rule for agency pricing. Agency pricing is very difficult and really complex. The 30-30 rule simplifies that, and that's where we're going to get into next. All right, so let's dive into what the 30-30 rule actually looks like. What matters here is like a few things. And this is what I mentioned a few seconds ago. Pricing is really hard to get right because there's so many factors. And the factors are everything from, what your competitors are charging, your actual sales process, because look, your sales process can determine whether or not you can extract maximum value for what you're selling, meaning you can't sell something above what it's worth, but you can get its full value by actually amending your sales process. Your target market's ability to pay, like, as the age old adage goes, if you want to make a lot of money selling something, you got to solve rich people's problems, right? So if your market is not willing to pay or is unable to pay, you're going to have to charge less for the same thing than if you were to deliver that thing to a market that has more money baked into it. Your brand is hugely important because it gives people a reason to believe before they understand everything about you because they haven't worked with you, etc. So your brand can actually deliver a lot of pricing power when you're trying to price something, especially against your competitors' brands. How good your service is, because like you have bragging rights, you have testimonials, you have case studies of and videos of other people telling people how great you are. This also factors into pricing. Rarity and uniqueness of your service is also a huge item because if there's not very many suppliers of what you're doing, you're a strategic supplier slash strategic partner to people. And when you're in that strategic partner seat, what happens is that you can price things at a much higher rate than if the relationship was much more transactional with your target audience. And like, look, I could go on and on and on about like other factors that really are at play when you're deciding pricing. But this is why the 30-30 rule is so important and it's so efficient because we can figure out really quick whether or not we're on the right side of the equation and what we got to do next. So let's jump into it. So let's break down the 30-30 rule. There's really two aspects to this. And the first one is, can you deliver your service for 30% or less of the total direct cost? Direct cost meaning all the people involved and the tools required to actually deliver the thing that you're delivering, right? Some people call this delivery margin, which is the opposite. If delivery cost is 30%, your delivery margin would be 70%, right? Because it's inverted. And secondly, a close rate of above 30%. This matters a lot. Why? Because the first scenario we're going to talk about is what happens when your close rate is too high. And I've encountered agencies, and this is actually like a problem that I keep seeing in my own clients, is that their close rates are 40, 50, 60, even sometimes 70% close rate, which sounds crazy, like because that means they're closing 2/3 of all the leads that are coming in, etc. And it's an incredible number. But what it tells me is that they are leaving money on the table. Why? An appropriate close rate for an agency should be somewhere in the vicinity of anywhere between high 20s to mid to low 30s, right? So if you're between 28 and 35, like that's a really good sweet spot. Once you climb much above that, again, slightly depending on the amount of lead flow you have, you may want to consider increasing price. So the example that I have to give you today is that I had an agency client that was charging around $125 per hour. Now they did everything based on value pricing, but the value pricing of the products and services they had was based on assumptions of how long it would take to deliver and then converting that into a dollar figure. Right? That way they could keep the surplus if they delivered faster. Well, the problem is that their close rate was actually above 60%. So we first increased price to 150, then 175, and then even $200. And guess what? At $200, they're still closing above 50%, which means that we could probably increase price even more. Okay. And for them, as they're doing the shift with brand new clients coming in, because those other clients are actually grandfathered at the older prices, they're going to increase the prices later on. What this means is that if we slowly convert the number of people that we have from 125 to 200, maybe even 225 or more, This is going to be the difference between them making 5 to 10% profit versus making as much as 35 or 40% profit while simultaneously also paying their staff much, much more. So that is really what to do when your close rate is too high, right? It's really simple. Your close rate's too high, increase your price. That's really the key takeaway here. Going to drive more profitability, everything. The market's telling you that it can support more cost from the offer that you are creating, right? But what happens when the actual cost to deliver is too high? Okay. And your close rate might not be at that, appropriate rate. So just to be clear about this, when the close rate's above 30%, it doesn't matter what your cost structure looks like, you increase the price to the clients. Okay. But what happens when the close rate is below that? There's two different scenarios here that we need to go through. Number one, what happens if your direct service cost is above 30 and or below 30. So let's go through those two items. So under the assumption that we are not closing enough, so our close rate is below 30%, the two scenarios. Scenario number one, when our direct cost is lower than 30%. By the way, I'm going to tell you up front, this doesn't happen often, meaning we are actually not closing enough, but our margins, if we do sell something, are very, very low. So our cost of delivery is very low. Well, the fix is actually pretty easy in this case. We just drop the price until the direct cost is around 30 to 35%. So for example, if you're delivering at 20% or 25%, lower your price on what you sell until you hit this 30 to 35% cost rate, right? And this might just on its own improve the close rate, right? Because if you're priced way above everybody else, blah, 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 it just might fix it so that you can actually become highly competitive and start closing at 30 to 35% plus. Like that could be as easy as it gets, right? By the way, this could obviously also be a sales and marketing problem, but I'm not going to go there directly for now because like the number of factors in terms of actually doing the sale properly and the marketing properly in order for sale to happen, like are like that can be its own thing. So we're only going to stick to more so like the business model in an agency sort of operational model of how to get this done with assuming that your sales and marketing process is reasonable. So that's what we're going to assume. Like I said before, most people do not have this problem. They actually have a problem where the cost is too high and they're closing too little. And this is where the rubber meets the road because it's a little bit harder. So when the direct cost is actually higher than 30%, and the close rate is too low, again, under the paradigm that we assume that sales and marketing is doing a reasonable job, it's very likely like a bit of a marketing problem, but for reasons that you may not like be familiar with. Okay. So this is, in my opinion, a great place to write internal case studies where you show people the amazing results that you get. So like sort of like a prerequisite of all of this is that we have to get great results for clients. Okay. And if we're not getting great results for clients and we're closing too little, it's probably because we can't show off the things that we've done that are amazing results. Right. So like we really need to focus in on that. And so let's get into what it looks like to write an internal case study, which then will become an external case study. An internal case study, meaning what did we do? And we basically are selling ourselves a case study, right? Versus an external case study, which is the regular version where you are actually just showing clients like, look, this is what we were able to achieve. Okay. When we're looking at this, what we want to think about is that the external, as I said, sales and marketing piece, but the internal should actually be a training piece. Okay. So we need to write a case study in a way that we outline how we got the results for the client. Okay. What the client actually already had going for them and that helped the result. And this is something that people ignore all the time. Like what was present before we as an agency even got there, right? Because if this client is getting great results, but the client next to them is not, it must be something that the client themselves is doing differently on their end. And we need to try to reverse engineer that, right? Said differently, we have to reverse engineer how we got the result, including the things that we did and the things that the client did, and understand both. Because we then need to explain each variable and their contribution to that result. And the purpose of this is that we want to do this internally for ourselves so that we can basically use this internal case study as core training for our staff so that they understand how to repeat this result in the future. Okay. Then we actually shoot the video, right? So we shoot the video where the most senior technical person walks through the nuance of why the results were what they were and how we can recreate this with other clients in the future. And we need to focus on the things that we can control versus things we didn't control that the client already had done, right? And that we can tell other clients to do, because this is actually what matters. If we can walk a client through what it is that we do and what it is that they have to do in order to get that amazing result, that's exactly what we need to do. We need to go beyond the things that we do and become a strategic partner to clients and show them what it is that they are responsible for to get these amazing results. And my general suggestion is that you first create this internal version of this case study, because after you create the marketing version, after the internal, it's going to be way more in depth because you now understand each and every single aspect of why the client got the result that they got. These will inevitably be the strongest and most persuasive case study. Generally, if you can't close enough, there might be something wrong with your sales marketing process. Again, that's like a totally different video. That's not why we're here today. The second piece is, can we demonstrate results to clients in a way and speak to these things in a way where the client understands the true value equation of what we're doing? So these internal case studies are not just important for your internal staff that's actually delivering the work. That's a huge component of this, but it's also important for your sales staff to understand it. So like they need to watch it. So when they are trying to close a client and they're trying to talk to a client, they can act as a strategic advisor and actually walk the client through what are all the things that we do? What are all the things that the client needs? And if you're this type of client, like if you have X, Y, and Z things, you're going to be a great fit, because when these things are present, we deliver amazing results. What you're in essence doing through this process is actually creating a more narrow qualification where the client has to say, yep, I have those, or I am committed to doing these, so that I can give you, the agency, the chance to shine at delivering the things that we need to do. And if we don't have these things and you walk us through them, we have this commitment baked in as part of our relationship with you to actually get these things done and get the results that you're talking about. Okay. And this is one of the biggest things as a takeaway that I can give you on how to actually improve your close rate by using internal training in a slightly modified way externally, to not only just train your own people and your sales team, but then create that amended version that's more external facing for the client. That way we can generate great clarity internally and externally about how and why we deliver the results that we deliver. So here's the key takeaways. You need to have a delivery margin of at least 70% to have room for scale. And I'm going to get into why. The cost of delivery, I mean, this really is the same thing. The cost of delivery can only be 30%. So 30% cost of delivery equals 70% delivery margin, right? To give you room for scale. This is the challenge that happens when your agency is a bit smaller, doing below 100 or 200K per month. You have a lot less management layers and non-billable people and all of these other things, which means that your profits are higher and your delivery could actually be more than 30%, and you're still making appropriate margin, right? But as you add these non-billable people, managers, etc., all of a sudden the costs go up and up and up and up because they're away from the delivery margin, because these people are not working on the actual product and or service, but they do add cost to the organization. And because maybe our delivery margins like, you know, 60% or 45%, and in some cases even 50% delivery margin, meaning like our cost is 50% to deliver. Once we start adding these managers and non-billable staff roles, we're going to shrink our margin progressively until there's nothing left. Okay. So this is how it should work out. 30% should be direct cost of delivery, because at full scale, when your agency is well on its way to $10 million plus, your total cost of payroll should only be about 45%, right? Said differently, 2/3 of payroll should be for delivery of the product and service. 15% of the payroll should go to administrative, management, support roles that are non-billable for the agency. Because then we're going to add another 20 to 25% SG&A, sales, general, and administrative, which is all your costs like marketing, um, rent, software that is like not directly billable, etc., like legal fees, consulting fees, any and all other costs that are non-cost of goods sold are your SG&A. So when you add in 45% plus say another 25 SG&A, you're going to end up overall with a 30% plus profit. So this is really the biggest takeaway of all. The difference between having 10 to 20% profit versus 30 to 35% profit can very well come down to this 30-30 rule, right? Because if we're pricing things too low, if we're winning too many deals, the right thing to do is increase price as much as we possibly can until we get that close rate to in the high 20s, low 30s, and keep the agency full by selling at those prices, at those close rates. So in summary, really what we have to do is observe the 30-30 rule, right? Get your close rate above 30%, but not too much. If it's way higher, you need to start increasing price and get that delivery cost at 30% or less. That way, you're going to have a very good agency that is making great profit, that is highly scalable in the future as you add non-billable and management roles. Once the 30-30 rule has been met, the next step is really to scale up your sales and marketing efforts under the 30-30 rule, meaning like we're staying in that nice balance so we can grow the agency very profitably. So as next steps, what I would do is take the 30-30 model, see how it applies to your agency, try to figure out what your delivery cost is, figure out what your close rate is, and see what the next steps are based on what we went over in this video. If you found any of this valuable, please let me know. Also, subscribe to the channel. And if you want any professional guidance on whether your business model or your pricing model in your agency needs some work, right, and you're unsure, in the description below, you're going to see a link to book my calendar directly, and you can chat with me.